Well, hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 501 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. On today's show, we are discussing why selective mediocrity may indeed be the key to success that we have been missing. So many of us were trying to do all the things, juggle all the balls, us women especially. You'll hear me say in today's episode that the patriarchy is built on the backs of women, and I do believe that to be true. So if we can't do all the things great, if we can't be 100% at everything, how can we go about slightly shifting our mindset towards being okay with being mediocre, at least in some parts of our lives? That's what we're talking about today. And here to help me do it is Whitney Casares. Whitney is the host of the Modern Mommy Doc podcast. She's an a.k.a. pediatric spokesperson, and she is also the author of the new book titled Doing It All, Stop Overfunctioning and Become the Mom and Person You're Meant to Be. Now listen to that title and let me tell you how I found this book. My husband was perusing the library and came across it and brought it home for me. Stop overfunctioning and be the mom and person you're meant to be. When he brought it home, it was a bit of a wake-up call for me, let's say. Whitney, so happy to have you on the show. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
Well, anytime. Introduce yourself to my listeners who might not know you. Who are you? What do you do? Tell us all the things.
I am by training a pediatrician and a maternal and child health expert. I have a degree in public health in maternal and child health. And that just means that I am an expert on that synergistic relationship between a mom's wellness and a kid's wellness and vice versa. So how those two things interact. And every single thing that I do is based upon the premise of trying to improve health for both moms and kids. And really, instead of moms feeling like they are broken, helping them to realize that the systems and the world they live in is broken, and then helping them to figure out what they can do despite that. Instead of like wilting and deciding, oh, we should just throw our hands up and give up, deciding what are the things that we actually have control of, what can we do? So I have a podcast, I have a blog, I have 3 books. And you mentioned the most recent one, which is called Doing It All. And I do a lot of speaking and talking and consulting with groups that share that same mission.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. The system is broken. Usually for me as a mom trying to do a lot, trying to juggle all the balls, my go-to reaction is just to be filled with mom rage all the time. But you're going to help me today, Whitney. You're going to help me. So in your book, you list 9 categories, I believe, 9 things that take up the bulk, the majority of the modern mother's time and energy. Can you walk us through some of them? Because I'll be honest, I feel like I'm being pulled in so many directions all the darn time. Like I couldn't even name the directions at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, the 9 categories that you're referring to from the book, they came out of a discussion that I had with a friend of mine who is an HR executive and who specializes in prioritization and efficiency and time management. And they include things like household management and tasks. So like maintaining your house, the dishes, the laundry, the cars. They fall into things like childcare issues. So arranging camps, making sure your kids have the backpack that they need, taking your kid to school, picking them up from school, spending time with your partner or your friends, actually spending time with your kids and having quality time with them, your actual professional work, if you get paid for the work that you do, personal fitness, travel, exploring the world, or other personal pursuits that you have, things like that. And basically what my friend asked me to do was to write down, in an ideal world, how would you rank how much time, energy, and attention that you give to any of those 9 things? And I ranked them for her. This is at a time when I was really low in my motherhood experience. I was feeling like, it sounds maybe like maybe you are, like I was being pulled in every single direction. And every single thing in my life had to carry the same level of weight or importance. So she asked me to rank them and said, what in your ideal world would be actually the ranking order of these things? And then she asked me to rank, what does it look like in your life right now? And I was shocked because the things that I cared the most about were at the very bottom of my list. And the things that I cared the least about were at the very top of my list. And some of those things at the top, of course, my professional work. At the time, I was working in a private practice. I was working 180 hours a month, seeing patients, like spending way too much time caring for other people's needs and putting my own needs aside. And also, I had a mortgage. I had to pay the bills. I had to make sure that I was putting bread on the table for my kids. And so it's not like I could just cross work off the list and say, oh, I don't want to spend as much time on that at all. I don't want to do any of that. And so I'm just not going to do it. Like I had to have some work on there. But things that I loved that filled me up, things like listening to live music, things like traveling the world or at least understanding other cultures, things like looking at art, those things, reading, those things were at the very bottom of the list of things that I spent any time on. And it made me just question, how am I spending my life? Am I going to be happy at the end of it with how I'm spending it? And I came to the understanding and to the realization, no, I was pretty darn unhappy, but that I did have some pieces of the puzzle that I could move around to make myself feel a lot more fulfilled and present.
Well, as you're listing out all those categories, Whitney, it becomes crystal clear to me that I can't do all the things. I can't give equal weight to all the things because number one, my time is finite, and number two, my energy is finite. Like we can't do it all. We have to rank order, or potentially, you mentioned in the book, practice selective mediocrity, which I love. But you, in the book, make distinctions between a conflicted woman versus a centered woman. And I want to know what are the telltale signs of both, but I also just want to say, I feel like for so many of us listening, being a conflicted woman is the norm, because if we have 9 categories of things that are pulling at our attention, we simply don't have the time to stop and sit in the quiet and get intentional. So the question there is, how do we know if we're conflicted versus how do we know if we're centered?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it is the norm. And I think we have to step back. First of all, let me tell you what conflicted means to me. And the reason I chose that word because I remember there's a day when it was a weekend day. I was working on a book manuscript. I had to have it done by the end of the weekend. And my kids were acting very needy. They emotionally were expressing to me how much they wanted me to be with them. And I was paralyzed by indecision about what I should do that day. Like I really needed to get this book thing done, but then my kids, and I was in the shower and I was crying, and my husband came into the bathroom and was like, gosh, you are just so conflicted. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that is the word. I feel torn. Like my heart feels like it's in multiple places at once. My brain always feels like it's in multiple places at once, as opposed to centered, which is I feel aligned. I feel like, okay, I'm in the pocket. I might be tired, but I'm emotionally feeling like I'm doing the things that fill me up, that give me purpose, that give me passion. I feel like from a cognitive standpoint that I am spending my time on things that actually matter to me and that are going to move me forward, either professionally or personally. Everybody knows, I think, that feeling of just feeling like you're almost buzzing inside as a mom. There's so many little ideas popping into your head constantly, or to-dos that are popping into your head, that you can't even focus on the task at hand. So that's the conflicted person. And the centered person is a person who knows what she wants, who is able to be present in the moment, whose feet are where her mind is, as psychologists like to say a lot about kind of mindfulness. And that's what I decided that I wanted to be. And that's what my entire framework is built upon. I want to touch, though, on this idea of it being the norm for people to feel conflicted, and moms especially to feel conflicted, and to go to the question of why. Why do we feel that way all the time? There's a couple reasons. Number one, because we have had a lot of shifts in our society in terms of what women are able to do, what they're able to accomplish outside of the home, which of course I think are amazing. I'm a doctor, for goodness sake. So I love that we have female astronauts and engineers and doctors and lawyers and all of that. But then the world and society has not caught up to there being dual income households, to women working outside of the house. Women have just continued to layer on all of those professional duties to what they have been doing in the home for centuries. And so no wonder we feel conflicted. No wonder we feel like it's all too much, because it is too much for one person to accomplish. Add to that the mental load and the fact that our partners, when we have them, they have not had a lot of education or a lot of examples in their own lives of, especially for males, of them stepping up to the plate and taking more ownership and dividing things more equally or equitably with us as women. So we have this additional obligation that we have on ourselves because of our professional duties. We have partners who are not equipped to actually be able to share the mental load with us. And then we have all kinds of conditioning as women about doing more and more, being people pleasers, putting others' needs above our own, the kind of sacrificial lambs to society. And all of that adds up to this really chaotic mess of feeling like, I'm not sure where to turn. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be placing my time, my energy.
Love everything about that response. And I'll just add to it and mention the structural issues that are also at play when it comes to women juggling all the balls. The patriarchy is built on the backs of women. Like your book's title is Doing It All, Stop Over Functioning and Become the Mom and Person You're Meant to Be. Like there's no doing it all, stop over functioning and become the dad and person you're meant to be book that I know of. And the fact that there's no book like this for men tells me that women have too much on their plates at the end of the day. And another reason why is because the patriarchy stays in prominence and power when women are doing all the things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And also the fact that there's no paid parental leave for both genders, right? Like we need paid parental leave for women, but we also need paid parental leave for men. So that way men can step up to the plate and into their power, as Eve Rodsky likes to say, so that they can share more of the mental loads, so that women don't become the default parent earlier on. We need childcare assistance, federal assistance on childcare. So that way both parties can work without it being such a financial stress, and so that women aren't the ones that leave the workforce in order to, quote unquote, make it so that they are the caretakers of their family even more. So there's tons of structural issues. There's bias in the workplace. There's the fact that women, when they don't do it all professionally, that they're looked at with some disdain, or that when they stand up for themselves in the workplace, we know that they're seen as more aggressive or like the B word, right? Versus when men stand up and ask for what they need, they're seen as leaders. And so tons of structural issues. And I work with a lot of organizations. I love the organization Moms First, for example, who does a lot of work on this. Fair Play Institute. They are a great organization. What I wanted to do in the book is to say, okay, there are all these structural issues, but I know that those structural issues are going to take a really long time to change, that they might not even change within my lifetime, that it might be that it's my children who are actually experiencing for their children a huge sea change in this area. And so while we work ardently on all of those structural issues, while we give our money, while we give our voice, while we really fight with our vote to make sure that we have structural change, I don't want women to then waste their lives while they're waiting for that change. So I wanted them to be able to have both, to have this be a yes and conversation for women.
I really appreciate you saying that, Whitney. We're going to table the structural issues. We're going to table the perhaps inequality we're experiencing in our heterosexual partnerships for today. We'll table all that. We'll work on them on our own time. But I want to talk to you mostly today about becoming more centered. You write in the book that of all the responsibilities that we have on our plate, I believe you even suggest we write them all down, we list them out. You suggest that we put them into categories, perhaps. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I encourage women to divide up the tasks and responsibilities that they have in their lives because, like you said, sometimes it can feel like it's so overwhelming that we can't even attack it. It's so overwhelming that all we want to do is just pull the sheets over our head because there's too much to do. We can't even attack all of it. So what I encourage people to do is for all the things that have to get done in their life, but that really shouldn't define them. I'm talking about chores, tasks, responsibilities, little checkboxy things that we all have on our to-do list, to divide them up into 4 categories. The first category is the non-negotiables, and these are the things that we have to get done, but only we can do them. One of the best examples that I have from my own professional life is my patient notes. I have to write a note every single time that I see a patient to document exactly what I saw, what I did, what my plan is, all of that. But I don't have to put in any more effort than is necessary. So AI tools are a great way for me to streamline that. Making sure that I have templates are a great way to streamline that. For a mom who is breastfeeding, for example, there are lots of ways to build more efficiency with pumping and with hands-free devices and that sort of thing. And so that entire section, I really focus on building efficiency, streamlining, and minimalism. Now, the only problem is if we just leave it at that for all the tasks, we put every single task into that category, what will happen? We'll check off all the things on our to-do list a little bit sooner, but then we will just add more to our to-do list because as women, we're conditioned to just do more and have this like super mom complex. So we have 3 other categories. The second category is called the swappables, and these are things that can be and should be given to other people in our lives. These are chores that your kids can do. As a pediatrician, I know developmentally what's appropriate in terms of ages for chores for kids to do. So I listed those out for you inside the book. I also talk at length, we have a whole entire chapter about how to divide and conquer with your partner. And I really believe there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to that, when it comes to making your life more of a business and trying to make it so your home life, you're dividing based off kind of strengths and weaknesses, not based off gender. But what I try to do in the chapter is to talk about how do you have the tough conversations with your partner about, I feel like I'm carrying too much and I need you to step up and be a true partner, truly be on my team for this. And how to get that self-awareness of I am feeling overloaded and it is making me so resentful and so angry with you as a partner. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the contaminators. These are all of the things that we say yes to out of obligation, out of guilt, out of social conditioning. So things like joining the PTA when you really don't want to, going to the school auction when it's not your thing, signing your kids up for the 5th extracurricular activity because that allows you to keep up with the Joneses, setting up a meeting with somebody when really you don't want to have a meeting with them at all. So trying to figure out where are there places where you can just straight eliminate. And that goes for clutter in your home as well. Are there places in your physical environment where you can say, I'm going to get rid of things so that I don't spend as much time and energy picking up as many messes because there are fewer things to get messy. And then finally, and I think this one's probably the most important, it actually ties back to all the rest of them, is the heartstrings. And these are things that you need to do, and you want to do, but that if you put too much of your heart and soul into them all the time, if you emotionally deplete yourself with them, you will run yourself ragged. It's places where we need boundaries. And the example that I give in the book is with my own dad. He has Parkinson's and I love him so dearly and I want to honor him as a parent and as an individual and as a grandparent. But man, it is hard emotionally to spend excessive amounts of time taking care, thinking about his own medical care and really supporting my mom, supporting him. And so I have to make sure, of course, that I'm giving to them and that I'm being a daughter that I can feel really proud of being. But at the same time, I have to make sure that I'm guarding my heart and not making it so that I give so much that I'm resentful or that I'm not able to give to all the other parts of my life as well.
I want to talk about how selective mediocrity can come in as we're going from conflicted to centered, because again, we can't do all the things and we certainly can't do all the things perfectly. You mentioned the supermom mentality. Sure, it would be great to be able to do everything perfectly. And our society tells us that we should, perhaps, or we could be able to, we should be able to, but that's just not reality. So how do we decide what we are going to consciously select to be mediocre at?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I love that you have this question. And so selective mediocrity is a tool that you can use. It's a tool in your tool belt for the non negotiables. So if it's something that you have to get done, you can decide, is this something that deserves my 100% effort, or is this something that deserves 50% effort? A good example would be in my house loading the dishwasher. My husband is a 100% effort kind of guy when it comes to loading the dishwasher. He has every single plate turned perfectly. He has all the forks aligned. Everything's great. I'm literally throwing everything into the dishwasher and saying it's done. This might also be if you're writing a work email and you would painstakingly go through it and say, okay, it needs to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to reread it 100 times to make sure that it's 100% right. It might be having like a Pinterest-worthy house where you really want it to be fully decorated and absolutely beautiful. Selective mediocrity would say, do we have a couch and a table and some chairs for people to sit in? And do I feel comfortable when I'm in my home? And do I feel peaceful when I'm in my home? And does it bring me some joy? Okay, awesome. Then I don't need anything else. So selective mediocrity is really deciding consciously that some of the tasks that are on our to-do list or some of the things in our lives do not deserve our full effort. It's basically allowing yourself to, I don't know if I can swear on this, cut this out if I can't, but it's allow yourself to half-ass it at some things, to say, I'm just gonna do it halfway. And that's okay, because that's going to allow me to give my full effort to other things that I care deeply about.
I like it. I like it. I'm on board, but I'm thinking about my listeners who are more type A than I am, perhaps. They want to excel in all the categories, even the non-negotiables, even the things as seemingly minute as loading the dishwasher. So what would you say to them?
I think there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do as women in this area. I'm that way too. I'm a type A person just by wiring. I'm an anxious person. I'm someone who wants to get it 100% right. I'm a recovering perfectionist. But I think this is where we can build some self-awareness and ask ourselves, why? Why does it matter? Why do I have my value derived from my house looking perfect? Why is my value derived from the dishwasher being perfectly stacked? Who cares? Aren't there more important things that should define my value, that should make it that at the end of the day, when I'm 80 years old, I look back at my life and say, I'm proud? The reason why we are that way is because, number one, anxiety drives a lot of our lives, and anxiety loves perfection because anxiety loves control. So perfectionism is about, I do this perfectly, and that means everything is going to go perfectly in my life. The reality is, even if you do things perfectly, even if you are the star A student, like I was, go to Stanford, get all the accolades, it does not mean your life is going to go perfectly or everything is going to go to plan, right? So we're spinning our wheels. We're wasting our time when we operate that way. And we can give ourselves a lot of compassion for it. So it doesn't mean you have to chastise yourself every time that you feel anxious and you feel like you want to be a perfectionist about the dishwasher. It just means you can stop, pause, notice that you are feeling that way about it, and then ask yourself why. And if the answer is because otherwise I feel like I'm not good enough, then you can give yourself so much compassion. That makes so much sense. It's because I was taught that the more I do, the more I accomplish, the more I'm able to perform, the better person that I am. I bet I could fill a coliseum full of other women who feel that exact way. And I have the choice to change that for myself, because unfortunately, the more that we operate that way, the more that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, the more it's, yep, if I'm only good enough if I do more, if I do it perfectly. So then I have to keep on doing it perfectly to be good enough. And no one wants that.
No, that sounds exhausting, running on that hamster wheel. You mentioned the heartstrings, and I want to touch on that for a couple of reasons. Number one, you said your father has Parkinson's. My heart goes to you. My grandfather had Parkinson's, so I know firsthand the sadness that comes with that disease. And then I also want to ask you about the heartstrings because for so many of us women, we have been conditioned, and I use that word on purpose, we've been conditioned to take care of others, to put others' needs and wants ahead of our own. So I'm not sure if we can practice selective mediocrity with the heartstrings, but you did mention putting boundaries on the heartstring obligations. How do we do that?
Yeah. There's all kinds of different boundaries in our lives, and we all practice boundaries all the time, especially those of us who are parents. I tell my kids no all the time. That's a boundary. We put boundaries on our physical spaces. We have a gate in front of our house, like a little picket fence gate. So that's a boundary. We put boundaries in terms of who's able to touch us physically in a sexual way or otherwise. So we're all practiced actually at having boundaries all the time. But one of the toughest boundaries, especially for women, is called a self boundary. And a self boundary that is unhealthy means you are constantly taking the temperature of other people and putting other people's needs ahead of your own needs. You're like always checking in your head. Ooh, how are they doing? How are they doing? Are they liking what I do? Are they okay with this? Are they taken care of? Are they good? And so a healthy boundary in this regard means, again, stopping and noticing, whoa, I'm doing it again. I'm putting this other person's need in front of my own. And what can I do to make it so at least my needs are on par with the other person's needs? Or that sometimes my needs are ahead of the other person's needs. Here's why it's important. When we operate in a way that consistently puts other people's needs ahead of ours, and I'm not talking about your kid needs their diaper change and you're like, I need to go on a Hawaii vacation. Oh, they're going to have to just sit in their poop. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your partner's need to relax after work is more important than your need to have some help in the kitchen. So when we are consistently putting other people's needs above our own, what happens is that our body, when we get quiet with our voice, when we don't speak up for ourselves, our bodies get really loud. Our bodies say, I'm angry. We get that feeling of tightness in our chest. We get headaches. We feel more anxious. We feel resentful. We overfunction. And then what do? We snap at our partner, or we're super emotional, or we're so flooded with emotion that we can't focus on the tasks that we need to do and we feel really overwhelmed. Then what happens? We snap, we blow up, we have a meltdown. Then we feel even worse about ourselves. So then we double down. We do even more. We put other people's needs ahead of ourselves even more and more. And so the cycle continues, which in the end is really not good for ourselves, of course, but also it's not good for the other people that we're in a relationship with. For our kids, it's a terrible example for them of how to operate as a human being. It's a terrible example for our partners if we want to move things forward and make it more equitable in our households. We lose our power, right? And 3, in the workforce, to go back to the structural issues, it makes it so that's harder to change. So we never make the progress that we want to, where we can say, oh, I am a strong person. This is what I need. And I'm happy to accommodate your needs as well, but not at the expense of my wills.
Whitney, you just spoke to my soul. And I'm going to paraphrase what you said, but when, our own needs aren't getting met, our bodies get very loud. For me, the anxiety rises until I snap. I usually snap at my husband, and then I feel bad about snapping because women who have it all together definitely aren't snapping, right? So then I feel bad and I feel like I need to make up for it by being extra good. And it's this cycle that I can't seem to break. But I want to just go back to the selectively mediocre point, because I'm thinking about how for many of us, especially those of us in traditional heterosexual partnership, like if a woman decided to let some things go, decided to be selectively mediocre, that sounds great. But if nobody is picking up the slack, then in a lot of partnerships and a lot of households, I'm assuming that means that the stuff's just not going to get done. Because again, the patriarchy is built on the backs of women. Any thoughts there?
Yes, it won't get done. If we don't do it at all, it won't get done traditionally. In my household too. And I want to be like very clear because I think sometimes when people write a book about stuff like this, people assume like I have it all together and my house runs perfectly. And my husband's like totally like running with flowers to me being like, how can I help? What can I do? That is not the case. We are still working on it in my household. It is not perfect, right? Like I'm still retraining like in my home, how I want it to be. So I agree. If we don't do it at all, if we don't do a task at all, by and large, in most American households, the task does not get done. But what does that do? It shows the other person in your partnership, hey, see how much I'm doing? If I don't do it, nobody's done it. It's a conversation starter. If I leave the laundry and I'm like, listen, we had a discussion. This goes back to the chapter about dividing up tasks and responsibilities, getting a system in place to say you're in charge of the laundry and I'm in charge of the dishes. So let's say my husband's supposed to be in charge of the laundry and he doesn't do it and it sits there and I decide I'm not going to pick up the slack. I'm not going to do it. Then it will continue to be there. And then what are my husband's options? He can come to me and say, it's a mess in here, or he could continue to ignore it. And then I have a couple options. This is where the boundaries come in. I can say, listen, I don't want a mess in the house. You told me that you were going to do this task. Go ahead and do it. Go for it. And then let's say it doesn't get done. In my household, I'm like, okay, then fine. It goes in a garbage bag and it's going in the garage until it can get done. I am not going to be the one that does it. I think also dividing up the tasks for the things that you care about that have to get done. Like I don't put laundry on my husband's list because that is something that's going to irk me to the ends of the earth if it doesn't get done. There are things in my mind that don't matter at all though. I don't care, like I said, if the dishes are done perfectly. I don't care if the beds are made perfectly. I don't care if the hedges are trimmed perfectly. Like there's a bunch of things in our house that I don't care about and that don't have to happen for my house to run. And I think as we're training our partners, we can decide, okay, this is the task that I'm going to hand off. This is a task that I still need to hold on to because again, I'm a perfectionist. I really want that to get done or because the kids need socks. There's also times where when my husband's been in charge of the laundry, if he doesn't do it or that task just sits there, that I have gotten everybody else's laundry out of the pile, leave his then on the floor or leave his in a trash bag and then clean my kids' stuff and let him like, listen, this is yours then to pick up. It's not my responsibility. We're both adults. I think what I'm trying to say is that the more that we rush in and fill the gap when our partners don't step up, the more that it continues the cycle of them not filling the gap and then not stepping up. The more that we can tell them in a way that is not snapping, in a way that is centered, listen, this is where I am. This is what I need. This is how I'm feeling. Then the more it's going to change. And how is it that we can be more centered? It's by having a strategy for all the things that have to get done, but that shouldn't define us. And by having a really crystal clear understanding of what does matter to us. What do we want to define us? So we started this conversation with the 9 categories of like, where do I want to spend my time and my energy? What are the 5 things in your life that you do want to spend your time and energy and focus on? What do you want to say yes to? Because that makes it so that when there are times when you're going to practice selective mediocrity, that you can say no really easily. Because you're like, oh no, I don't have time for that. I'm focused on these really important things. I'm going to go speak to a group of women for 2 hours. So the laundry, are you kidding me? I'm going to step over that pile. Doesn't matter. I'll get to it when I get to it. Or I'm going to get to it, but selective mediocrity would say, I'm going to stuff it into the drawers and not fold it. Or I'm going to lay it on the kids' beds and say, if you guys want it folded, then you're going to have to do it yourselves. So I think it comes back to that idea of deciding, what do I care the most about? What do I want to prioritize? And having that crystal clear in your mind so that when these things do come up that you're tempted to be a perfectionist about, or that other people might not swoop in and fill the gap for as much as you want them to, we can let them go.
Yes. Your answer there, Whitney, makes me realize it's about actually mentally letting them go. Like not passing stuff off and then pretending you don't care, but secretly still really caring, and then fixing the task that you gave to your partner when they're not looking and fuming about it and banking that frustration to take out on them later. Like it's actually about mentally letting go. And that's where I've struggled, I think.
Yeah. And that is a practice. Like, you've got it. That's 100% what it is. It's not about, okay, I'm going to hand it off and then I'm going to really actually, but I do care. Not. No, it is about that mental practice of actually deciding I have permission to not care about this. And that is not something that happens overnight. That's a journey. That's a constant reminder. It's something that when I'm spending time doing yoga or just sitting quietly, whatever, those are things that I'm reminding myself. Or when I get anxious or when I do blow up about things, it's when I'm like, okay, remind yourself, this is something you can let go of because it doesn't matter.
I love it. I'm going to keep working on it. I thank you so much for your insight and wisdom. Tell us where we can find you online, where we can find your books. Give us all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find my books wherever books are sold. And then you can find out more about me, all kinds of freebies, all kinds of free content at modernmommydoc.com. And then I hang out on the gram a lot. You'll see me being silly and trying to be relatable and help people just feel seen so that, like you're mentioning, as you're on your journey, you don't feel like you're alone or that you're behind the times, because none of us are perfect and none of us have it right. This is a constant revisiting of old conditioning, continued conditioning that we've had since birth.
Yeah. And none of us have it figured out. Like we're all just like winging it as we go along. So thank you so much. I'm going to follow you on the gram right now. I need some feel-good content. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Whitney. Listeners, that's a wrap, my friends. Show notes at mamaminimalist.com/501. If you like the show, you've got to support it. It's just the way it goes. We still need here on this show about 300 more subscribers. Yes, that's right, 300. So if you can afford $5 a month or $50-ish a year, I think it's like $44.99 on Apple Podcasts a year for a year of shows, 108 shows. If you have the financial means to support the show to keep it in existence, you would have my eternal gratitude, and I would so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekends with your loved ones. I'll see you Tuesday, and take care.